do you see this as different than like previous economic crises that we've experienced over the last few major cycles? Or is this just the expected outcome as you're describing?
Well, what's different about it is the size now, right? I mean, it's a bigger problem than what we had in 2000 or 2008 or 2020 with COVID. Where we are now, the problems are much bigger. But I think the significant difference is that inflation is at a level that no longer allows the Fed the luxury of being able to rescue the markets or the economy by printing money and slashing interest rates, because that actually is inflation. Mm-hmm. If you understand, the Fed's solution to every problem has been inflation. That's what the Fed does. It creates inflation. Inflation is the expansion of the money supply. So the Fed inflates every time there's a problem, and it inflates our way out of the problem. But when they do that, they actually prevent the problem from really being solved. They just kind of kick the can down the road and let the problem get worse. But at this time, because the Fed has already created so much inflation, and what gave them the leeway to be able to do that and the pretense, they kept pointing to the CPI, as flawed as it is, and they said, hey, inflation is below 2%. That's not good. We need 2%. That's our mandate. And so we can print all this money and stimulate the economy because it kills two birds with one stone. It can help us revive the economy and stimulate growth. Plus, we can get up to our inflation goal, which is, we need to get up to 2%. Well, that was always BS. I mean, we don't need 2% inflation. I mean, 1% inflation is better than 2%. 0 is better than 1. -1 is better than 0. Prices going down is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. It's good for everybody. It's good for business. They sell more products. It's good for consumers. They can buy more stuff. Everybody wins when you have falling prices. But the government manufactured that lie to make an excuse. But now that inflation is way above 2%, they no longer have a pretense for creating more inflation. Clearly, we don't need more inflation. Inflation is too high. And so that takes the Fed out of the game. Now we get a stock market crash, we get a recession, we get a financial crisis. The Fed can't do anything. And if the Fed can't do anything, the government can't do anything. Because where does the government get money to stimulate or to bail out? From the Fed. Well, the Fed's not giving the government money anymore. In fact, the Fed is actually billing the government. A lot of people don't realize this, but now that the Fed is raising interest rates, it's losing a ton of money on its $9 trillion balance sheet. But while interest rates were at 0 and they had this big balance sheet and they were collecting all this income, they were making money. And so they were sending Congress a check, a lot of money, which helped offset the deficits. Now the Fed is losing billions, tens of billions, soon hundreds of billions. They're sending Congress a bill. The Fed needs a bailout from the U.S. government. So this is a very different situation than we've been in. This is the end game, right? The end of the road. This is, where we pay the piper.
So are there any other economic leaders that you find that this message has resonated with, like in the Fed or in the government? Because this to me seems obvious. And I also feel frustrated that the leadership has not taken dramatic turn or keeps postponing the pain.
Look, Donald Trump, when he ran for president, said some things like this, criticized Janet Yellen and the Fed for inflating a bubble and keeping interest rates too low and creating a phony economy. So he was good at pointing out those problems when he wasn't president. When he became president, he wanted Jerome Powell to do everything that he criticized Janet Yellen for doing. Because once he became in power, he recognized that if the Fed did the right thing, we were going to have a massive economic implosion, and he didn't want to get blamed for that. He wanted to pretend that he presided over the greatest economy in the history of America. He didn't make anything great. I mean, he made our debt great. Donald Trump ran on a platform of shrinking the trade deficit. We had record trade deficits under Trump. Now they're bigger now under Biden because Biden has already broken Trump's record, but Trump broke Obama's record. Trade deficits got bigger, budget deficits got bigger. The bubble. And what did Trump want? He wanted 0% interest rates. He wanted negative rates. He wanted quantitative easing. So he became a champion of everything he criticized. So it's very difficult for anyone in government to be honest with the American public because, the voters really don't have the intellect for honesty. They don't have the attention span to be told the truth about how bad things are. So everybody wants something for nothing from the government. They don't want to hear, oh God, you're going to have to suffer. This is some bitter tasting medicine, but don't worry. Americans don't want that. They want the get rich quick scheme. They want exercise and diet. They want a cream that they can just rub on, a miracle cream to get rid of the cellulite. You're not going to find politicians. Now, there was one, right? I mean, Ron Paul was a friend of mine, and he was in Congress for a long time, and he ran for president. I was actually the economic advisor when he ran the first time in 2008. And if you remember, he ran in 2007. He was out there talking about the coming financial crisis. Nobody listened to him, right? We were talking about it back then. It was around the corner. He was the only one warning about it. I mean, his son is in the Senate now, who I'm also friendly with. But, there's really not that much he can do. He's a little bit more pragmatic than his dad was. So he's trying to influence people more subtly. But it's very difficult message to sell politicians because the Republicans, they want more spending. I mean, you don't see the Republicans. I mean, they're saying, oh, Biden is creating inflation with his spending. What about all this Trump spending? He didn't cut any government spending. Government spending rose sharply while Trump was president. The deficits rose. All of the COVID bailouts, which were a mistake, were started by Trump. He signed the PPP was a disaster. It never should have happened. I mean, we did the opposite of what we should have done during COVID. What we should have done during COVID, well, obviously we shouldn't have done anything. We shouldn't have locked down. We should have done what Sweden did. And I said that at the time. But if we were going to make the mistake of ordering people not to go to work, we should have allowed the money supply to contract and allowed the economy to implode, because if we're not going to go to work and we're not going to produce stuff, well, then we have to have a massive recession. People have to stop spending because they're no longer earning. They're no longer producing. But we did the most reckless thing you could have possibly done. We told people not to go to work, but then we sent them checks. And many people were getting checks that were double or triple what they were earning when they actually were productive. And we said, hey, you don't have a job, but here's a bunch of money. Go out and buy stuff. Buy what? Nobody was making anything. All they were making was money. So we created massive inflation. They should have been contracting the money supply, along with a contraction in the production of goods and services. But, we couldn't do that because banks would have failed. We're all levered up. We couldn't have survived that. And so we created inflation, and we're paying the price. But the inflation that we have today is not just because of what happened after COVID. I mean, we've been creating this inflation for more than a decade, and we're just starting to feel the beginning of it. It's going to get so much worse.